So I want you to imagine, just for a second, dedicating an entire epoch of your life to this singular, towering vision.
Right.
Like maybe it's this incredibly ambitious, creative endeavor that just consumes your waking thoughts from the dawn of each day until the absolute dead of night. Or, maybe it's a monumental shift in your career path, or even the pursuit of a really profound partnership.
Oh, absolutely. The kind of thing that becomes your whole world.
Exactly. And you've aligned every single action. You've painstakingly refined your internal state, and you finally step forward with this absolute unshakable certainty.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the threshold of your victory. You can literally feel the warmth of it radiating against your skin. You've arranged the vast constellations of your life to point toward this solitary destination.
And the anticipation in that moment, I mean, it's a physical weight. You're suspended in this atmosphere of just pure potential, completely vulnerable to the outcome.
And then, and this is where it all falls apart, the ultimate rejection arrives. The door doesn't just gracefully close, right? It violently slams shut right in your face.
Yeah, the worst feeling.
The outcome you're handed is the exact polar opposite of the one you desired. It's just a profound disorientation. It's this devastating collapse of everything you thought you knew about your trajectory.
It completely knocks the wind out of you.
Right. You immediately descend into this heavy, suffocating atmosphere. The air in the room suddenly feels thick, almost unbreathable.
Total.
And you're just left standing there staring at this closed door, wondering why this fleeting moment in time feels less like a temporary setback and more like this malicious infection that's just rapidly spreading through the totality of your psyche.
Well, that suffocating weight you're describing, it's a universal human experience. It's a fundamental part of navigating this physical realm. And feeling the crushing gravity of that moment is entirely natural. But our mission in this exploration, it's to completely shatter the conventional understanding of why that weight exists in the first place.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's do it.
We are going to uncover the hidden mechanics of reality itself. Because what humanity so readily labels as an external defeat, that closed door, that sharp rejection, the deafening silence, it's merely a neutral occurrence.
Neutral, wow.
Yes, it is fundamentally empty of inherent malice. The true crisis, the actual failure, is not the physical event that transpired outside of you. The catastrophe is the invisible internal descent that happens a fleeting heartbeat later.
So the external event doesn't actually matter.
Right. And through this conversation, we're going to reveal the precise universal mechanics to instantly alchemize this heavy, stagnant state into a springboard for inevitable triumph.
Okay, but if we're going to look at this, we have to address the sheer friction of that claim.
Fair enough.
Telling someone who has just watched an entire era of their life's work dissolve into nothingness that the event is neutral, I mean, that's a massive, almost offensive paradigm shift.
It is. It's incredibly confronting.
Because when you're standing in the wreckage of a collapsed vision, it feels profoundly personal. How on earth can a devastating rejection, one that alters the entire trajectory of your existence, be considered neutral?
Well, it requires an absolute surrender of the human ego. I mean, we have to look at the fundamental truth of how the cosmos operates, completely devoid of our emotional projections.
Okay.
The core principle we have to accept here is that reality just is. It simply exists. It lacks any intrinsic meaning whatsoever beyond the exact meaning assigned to it by human perception.
So it's totally blank until we paint on it.
Precisely. The cosmos does not possess a personality. It doesn't harbor grudges. It definitely doesn't possess a ledger keeping track of your missteps.
Right.
It is simply an infinite reflective canvas. It's just bouncing back a state of consciousness. It's completely devoid of malice, vendetta, or personal bias.
So when we fail to attain the outcome we desperately want, the universe isn't handing down a punishment. It's not like some cosmic test measuring our worthiness or our resilience.
Not at all. The universe does not test. It only reflects.
Wow.
The whole idea of a testing universe, that's just the human ego desperately attempting to personalize an impersonal, mechanical reality.
That makes so much sense, but it's so hard to accept.
It is. And so we fall into this widespread collective trap of obsessing over the external outcome. We stare endlessly at the physical manifestation of our defeat.
We just fixate on it.
Right? We fixate on the rejected proposal, the silent communication, the empty horizon. We give an overwhelming magnitude of our attention to the physical reflection while completely and utterly neglecting the projector.
And the projector is our internal frequency.
Exactly.
I always picture this dynamic like walking into a massive, elaborate hall of mirrors.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so you stride in, expecting to see a magnificent, triumphant version of yourself. You fully expect the glass to show you the victor, but you look up and the reflection is distorted, unpleasant, maybe even terrifying. And instead of looking down at your own body, instead of adjusting your own posture, straightening your spine, or softening your expression,
You attack the glass?
yes, you clench your fists and start furiously attempting to shatter the glass all around you. You are literally screaming at the mirrors, demanding that they change the image they're displaying.
And attacking the projection rather than the projector is the endless, exhausting labor of humanity. We spend an endless tide of energy trying to manipulate the glass.
But hold on. I have to voice the profound frustration of anyone who has actually been trapped in that mirror house.
Please do.
When that glass shatters, the shards feel incredibly real. The cuts bleed. The financial ruin, the broken heart, the public humiliation. These are not abstract philosophical concepts when you are living them.
No, they're very intense.
They are visceral, terrifying realities that threaten our actual survival. If a monumental endeavor collapses and I lose my livelihood, my biological hum of survival goes into overdrive.
Of course it does.
So how do we stop ourselves from swinging at the glass when the reflection is causing us palpable, agonizing pain?
Well, here's the secret. The pain is largely generated by our ferocious resistance to the reflection rather than the reflection itself.
Wait, really? The resistance is the pain?
Yes. The glass only feels sharp because our prolonged, terrified focus on it solidifies it into our perceived reality. We pour our emotional life force into the image of our ruin, which makes it denser and heavier.
Wow.
And this brings us to a very subtle, profoundly dangerous trap that snares even the most dedicated seekers. It's the trap of the spiritual ego.
Oh, the false armor of self-awareness, like the delusion that reading enough books makes you bulletproof.
Exactly. Often individuals will gather vast constellations of philosophical knowledge. They study the mechanics of the mind, they observe their thoughts, they isolate themselves in quiet contemplation until they feel completely detached from the mundane struggles of humanity.
Right, they think they're above it all.
Yeah, and through this accumulation of data, they construct an artificial ego, an invisible fortress. They genuinely believe they have transcended the natural rhythms of existence.
They tell themselves their mastery of esoteric concepts makes them immune to the ebb and flow of the material world.
Yes. They think they've uninstalled the storm clouds from the sky simply because they bought an umbrella. They assume their intellect protects them from the rain.
That is such a brilliant way to put it.
But when the natural tides of the cosmos inevitably recede, or when a massive, unforeseen tempest rolls across their horizon, they are entirely shattered.
Because they weren't actually immune.
Right, and their devastation is actually of a far greater magnitude than someone who knows absolutely nothing about these concepts.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Because they are rocked to their core. They genuinely believe their accumulated knowledge granted them a special exemption from reality's neutral fluctuations. They thought they were floating above the universe, rather than participating as a localized point of consciousness within it.
Which means we need a completely new foundational definition of what it actually means to bring a desire into physical reality.
We do.
Because the old definition, the idea that success is wrestling the external world into submission, is clearly keeping us trapped in the mirror house, exhausting ourselves by swinging at the glass.
Right. The true definition of bringing a desire into reality is not about forcing the mirrors to change their reflection.
Okay, so what is it?
It is achieving an internal shift of such an overwhelming, immense magnitude that you are no longer emotionally dependent upon seeing the external reality change. You reach a state of absolute internal saturation.
Let me just with the gravity of that for a second. The victory isn't the moment the external world finally hands you the trophy.
No.
The true victory is the moment your internal state becomes so incredibly dense, so gravitational, so utterly convinced of its own reality that you simply do not care if the external world has caught up yet. You are fulfilled before the evidence arrives.
That is the exact moment of alchemical transformation. When your internal frequency is entirely self-sustaining, entirely independent of physical proof, the external mirrors have Absolutely no choice but to eventually reorganize and reflect that new posture.
So the delay is just the logistics of the physical world catching up.
Precisely. The delay between the internal shift and the external manifestation is merely the time it takes for dense matter to rearrange itself. But if you're constantly checking the mirror,
If you're scanning the horizon every single moment to see if your reality has changed yet.
then you're still bound by the illusion of the external. Your internal state is conditional, and therefore it's inherently weak.
Right. Because if the external environment and our internal state are engaged in this constant intimate dance, we need to understand the music they're moving to.
Yes.
If we want to stop being thrown off balance by the storms, we have to actually understand the physics of the wind.
Exactly. And to understand the fundamental mechanics governing this realm, we have to dissolve the ultimate human illusion, and that is the illusion of separation.
Okay, break that down for me.
This physical plane is entirely governed by the universal law of polarity. It's the concept that forces we perceive as exact opposites, hot and cold, light and dark, masculine and feminine. They are absolutely not opposing warring forces.
They're not fighting each other.
No, they're the exact same energy, merely vibrating at completely different intensities.
Okay, so hot and cold aren't enemies fighting for territory on a thermometer.
Yeah.
They aren't two different substances at war.
Right.
They are just the presence or absence of the exact same thermal energy. They exist on a single, unbroken continuum.
Yes. And the profound reality-altering realization happens when we overlay this universal thermal concept onto the human experience of ambition. We must apply the law of polarity directly to success and failure.
Wait, so success and failure are not two diverging destinations at opposite ends of a vast map?
No, they're not.
They aren't two different roads?
They are a single, identical substance.
Oh, wow.
They're the exact same energetic material, separated only by their rate of vibration. The perception that they are completely separate experiences governed by different rules is the ultimate illusion of human limitation.
So when you experience a monumental failure, you haven't actually veered off the path to your ultimate success.
Not at all. You are standing on the exact same continuum. You are handling the exact same energetic substance. You are merely interacting with it at a lower, denser, heavily stagnant frequency.
That is mind-blowing.
You are holding the raw material of your victory. It is simply frozen solid.
So understanding this exposes a massive paradox in the human psyche, specifically regarding our relationship with fear. Because if failure and success are the exact same energetic substance,
Then holding a profound, paralyzing fear of failure intrinsically equates to harboring a secret, subconscious fear of success.
oh man, they are utterly inseparable.
Exactly. By actively avoiding the vibration of failure, by shrinking away from the potential of a closed door, you are unconsciously avoiding the vibration of success. You cannot reject one end of the continuum without rejecting the entire continuum.
You cannot fear the ice without also fearing the steam.
Perfectly said.
This beautifully explains why humanity is so often trapped in a perpetual state of indecision. If you are absolutely terrified of a dark, looming shadow, you are going to instinctively hide from the brilliant, blinding light that casts it.
Right. We just stay in the dark.
We spend vast eras of our lives tiptoeing around, engineering our circumstances to avoid the heavy vibration of defeat. And by doing so, we completely insulate ourselves from the soaring, expansive vibration of triumph.
We confine ourselves to this murky, gray middle ground.
Totally paralyzed, neither failing grandly nor succeeding profoundly.
And we confine ourselves because we fundamentally misunderstand the anatomy of a defeat. We operate under the delusion that the external event itself is the lethal blow. We believe the slam of the door is what destroys our ambition.
I have a visual for this that I simply cannot shake.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you're wandering through a dense wilderness, and a serpent strikes you.
Okay.
The immediate sharp pain of the puncture wound is shocking. It demands your attention. It hurts. But a tiny, superficial puncture wound does not bring a towering giant to its knees.
No, the bite itself is small.
Right. The physical impact of the bite is negligible. What brings the giant down, what causes the collapse of the organism, is the venom left behind. The venom that's allowed to fester and circulate rapidly through the bloodstream.
That is the perfect analogy. The external rejection, the collapsed endeavor, the lost opportunity, the public humiliation is merely the physical bite.
It's just a pinch.
It is a momentary, entirely neutral event in space and time. It is a sudden transfer of kinetic energy, nothing more. The true danger, the actual mechanism of destruction that unravels a life, is the internal venom that follows the bite.
So let's isolate that venom under a microscope. What exactly is this toxic substance made of? What is actually circulating through our psychological bloodstream when a door slams shut?
Well, the venom is composed of powerful, unmanaged emotional frequencies. Emotions are the fundamental binding agents of the cosmos.
Binding agents, like glue.
Exactly like a cosmic adhesive. They quite literally glue human consciousness to specific physical conditions. When you experience that momentary bite, that rejection, and you immediately surrender your posture, allowing yourself to descend into a heavy negative frequency, you are actively pumping the venom through your own veins.
So we're poisoning ourselves.
Yes. You are binding yourself perfectly and inextricably to the exact circumstances you are trying so desperately to escape.
It functions exactly like quicksand.
Right.
The more you thrash around in the despair of the failure, the more you analyze the unfairness of the closed door, the deeper you sink into the physical reality of it. Your frantic struggle to escape the feeling actually solidifies the environment around you.
It does. And to truly comprehend the mechanics of this venom, we need to present a radical, deeply uncomfortable conceptualization.
Okay, lay it on me.
We must view this heavy, negative frequency, not just as a fleeting feeling or passing mood, but as a blind, autonomous entity.
An entity.
Imagine it as a spiritual organism, an invisible parasite born entirely from the massive collective tide of human disappointment.
Wait. I need to make sure we're not losing the listener in abstract mythology here. We're not just talking about feeling sad.
No.
We are describing a localized pocket of energetic density that possesses its own primitive survival instinct. A literal parasitic frequency.
Exactly. And like any organism in the natural world, to survive, this entity must feed. It requires sustenance.
What does it feed on?
It sustains itself by deliberately generating, amplifying, and harvesting a distinct cluster of highly specific emotional frequencies within its human host. It latches onto the psyche and begins its extraction.
What are the frequencies in that cluster?
The first frequency is crushing disappointment. It is that sudden, visceral sinking feeling in the center of your chest when the expectation of reality violently collides with the physical evidence.
Right, it's the shock of the drop.
Yes. The second frequency is paralyzing discouragement. This is the heavy, suffocating lethargy that settles over your limbs. It is the insidious voice that whispers in the quiet hours of the night, "Why even attempt this again? What is the point of exerting effort when the outcome is always ruin?"
So disappointment is the immediate, breathless shock of the fall, and discouragement is the lingering, dull ache of lying bruised on the ground, entirely unwilling to stand back up.
Exactly. And the final and perhaps the most vital frequency for this entity's long-term survival is an overwhelming projective fear of future attempts.
Oh, rejecting it forward.
Right. The entity takes the raw pain of the past failure and projects it onto the vast blank canvas of the future, convincing the host that any forward movement will inevitably result in identical agony. This ensures the host remains entirely frozen, providing a stable, continuous food source.
Wow. So after the initial bite of rejection, this entity of defeat latches onto our consciousness. It starts pumping these frequencies, disappointment, discouragement, and fear into our nervous system. Not because the universe hates us, but simply because the entity is trying to keep itself alive.
Precisely. It needs you to stay miserable so it doesn't starve.
That's wild.
And it utilizes one of the most powerful, ancient mechanics of reality to secure its survival, the law of magnification.
Okay, what is that?
The universe naturally, automatically, and without prejudice magnifies whatever base energetic state is held by the observer.
So whatever frequency we are emitting, the cosmos essentially acts as an infinite amplifier. It doesn't judge the signal, it just turns up the volume.
Exactly. When you emit the frequency of intense, heavy discouragement, the cosmos obliges with absolute perfection. It begins meticulously arranging an endless tide of circumstances, external events, and human interactions that perfectly match and amplify that exact discouragement.
So that's why bad things seem to happen in clusters.
Yes. You will suddenly find yourself entirely surrounded by pessimistic, draining individuals. You will encounter seemingly random, inexplicable strings of bad luck. The machinery of your life will break down. You will experience a cascade of minor inconveniences that validate your internal state of ruin.
The mirror house recognizes your distorted posture, and it begins reflecting that distortion back at you from every single conceivable angle. Everywhere you look, you find physical evidence that your life is falling apart.
But we must ask a deeper question regarding the parasite's motivation. Why is this entity feeding on these specific frequencies? What is the ultimate prize, the vital organ it is truly trying to consume?
Because it's not just making us miserable for the sake of arbitrary suffering. Misery is just a byproduct. It have a primary target.
Yes. Its ultimate objective, its absolute primary target, is to slowly, methodically, and permanently erode your conviction.
Conviction. Let's really carve out the exact meaning of that word. Because we use terms like belief and conviction completely interchangeably in modern conversation.
We do, and it's a huge mistake.
But in the context of alchemizing reality, they are worlds apart. They're entirely different species of thought.
There's a profound, practically infinite chasm between believing and knowing. Belief, by its very architectural nature, inherently contains the seed of potential doubt.
Right.
It is built upon a foundation of hope, which implies a lack of certainty. When you boldly declare that you believe a towering vision will materialize, you are simultaneously subconsciously acknowledging the very real possibility that it might not.
Because if you knew, you wouldn't need to believe.
Exactly. Belief requires constant, exhausting, energetic effort to maintain. It requires affirmations, motivation, and external reassurance.
When someone says, I truly believe my endeavor will succeed, there is almost always a tiny, insidious whisper in the darkest corner of their mind echoing, but maybe it will completely collapse.
Always. Knowing, on the other hand, leaves absolutely no room for debate. It is a cellular biological certainty. It is entirely devoid of effort.
Like knowing the sun will rise.
Precisely. When you absolutely know the sun will crest the horizon at dawn, you do not spend the darkest hours of the night nervously pacing the floors, reciting frantic affirmations about the sunrise.
You don't try to convince yourself that the light will return.
No, you simply rest in the dark, possessing an unshakable knowing that the dawn is an inevitable mechanical certainty.
So when nothing in the external world, no slam door, no violent rejection, no empty bank account can convince you otherwise, that is the exact moment you convince reality to bend. You literally become heavier than the world around you.
That is the ultimate hidden secret of the alchemist. When your internal state of knowing becomes so incredibly dense, so gravitational, and so utterly immovable that no external reflection can sway your posture, reality must bend to accommodate your mass.
It has no choice.
None. The great sweeping tragedy of the human condition, however, is that humanity almost exclusively wields this absolute, unshakable conviction in the entirely wrong direction.
Oh man, the gravity of that realization is devastating. We hold absolute cellular conviction in the things that destroy us.
Yes.
We know we're going to fail. We know we're never going to catch a break. We know the economic system is rigged against our survival. We possess absolute, effortless certainty in our own inherent limitations and our inevitable ruin.
And the cosmos, flawlessly obeying the law of magnification, dutifully bends the physical reality to prove you absolutely right. It honors your conviction of ruin by constructing a monument of failure around you.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us in the immediate aftermath of a collapse?
Right, the practical application.
Yeah, if we have just been bitten by the serpent, if the door is just violently slammed shut, and we can feel this entity of defeat actively injecting disappointment, discouragement, and fear into our bloodstream, trying to consume our conviction, how do we stop the spread?
We have to act fast.
How do we physically extract the venom before it reaches the vital organs of the subconscious mind and rewrites our future?
Because once that heavy emotional charge of defeat solidifies, cools, and hardens within the deep architecture of the subconscious, it ceases to be a fleeting emotion. It becomes the new, permanent blueprint for your entire reality.
The concrete dries.
Exactly. To stop this calcification, we must introduce the alchemist's antidote. We must actively, deliberately, and forcefully interrupt the subconscious cycle before the concrete dries.
Walk us through the absolute mechanics of this. What is the practical protocol? If I'm sitting in my car, having just been dismissed from a career I spent in era building, and I feel the entity of defeat wrapping his hands around my throat, what is the exact sequence of actions I take in that driver's seat?
It is known as the protocol of reimagination, and it must be executed with surgical precision and immense emotional intensity. The very moment you feel the heavy, paralyzing descent of failure, the moment the bite occurs, you must immediately sever your attention from the external stimuli.
Just cut it off entirely.
Yes. You close your eyes. You detach from the physical environment of the car, the office, the silent room. You enter a deeply relaxed, meditative state. And this doesn't require hours of monastic isolation, okay? It can be fully accomplished in a concentrated period lasting merely the span of a quiet, intentional breath.
So you are entirely unhooking your sensory perception from the physical wreckage around you. You are withdrawing your consciousness into the void.
You enter the dark, silent void of your own internal landscape, and within this void, you intentionally recall and vividly reimagine the very specific, agonizing moment of defeat you just experienced.
Wait, you bring it back up?
Yes, you bring up the image of the slammed door, the rejection letter, the terminating conversation. But, and this is the absolute foundational crux of the protocol as the scene plays out in your mind, you forcefully and completely invert the outcome.
Oh, you become the director, and you rewrite the memory in real time. You alter the physics of the past.
You construct a brief, incredibly vivid scene of absolute, overwhelming triumph. You replace the rejection with an enthusiastic acceptance. You replace the dismissal with a monumental promotion. However, the scene cannot simply be an image of you standing alone in an empty room, quietly cheering for yourself.
Why not?
The solitary victory lacks the necessary emotional gravity. The scene must contain a crucial, non-negotiable element. It must include the profound, visceral acknowledgement, congratulation, or validation from a deeply loved one.
Why is the presence of another human being required in the visualization? Why can't I just visualize the signed contract sitting on a desk?
Because human consciousness possesses an incredibly deep biological craving for external validation to solidify an internal state. We are a social species.
Right.
When you visualize someone you deeply love, a partner, a parent, a lifelong friend looking you directly in the eyes, tightly gripping your shoulders and telling you with tears in their eyes how incredibly proud they are of your triumphant success, it generates a massive, involuntary emotional spike. It bypasses the analytical mind entirely.
I am not just looking at a piece of paper that says I won. I am feeling the warmth of my partner's hands. I am hearing the exact cadence of my best friend's voice as they tell me, I always knew you possessed the strength to achieve this.
Exactly. You feel it. And then you must take this brief, incredibly vivid scene no longer than the span of a passing thought in duration, and you must loop it.
Just play it over and over.
You play it over and over again with immense, continuously escalating intensity. You do not allow the rational mind to wander back to the physical reality of the car or the office. You trap your consciousness in this loop.
Wow.
You loop it until a completely overwhelming physical, emotional charge of triumph, profound gratitude, and total relief is generated within your biological body. You must literally feel the warmth expanding in your chest, the tension releasing from your jaw, the tears prickling the corners of your eyes. You must saturate your nervous system with the chemistry of victory.
Okay, I have to stop you there because the skeptical analytical mind, the intellectual ego we dissected earlier, it is screaming objections right now. It is pounding on the table.
I'm sure it is.
Isn't this entire protocol just a very elaborate, beautifully disguised form of psychological delusion?
That's the most common pushback.
Are we not just sitting in a dark car, completely unmoored from reality, lying to ourselves to chemically numb the agonizing pain of our actual circumstances? I mean, if a towering endeavor collapses and I just sit there hallucinating a victory, my external problems remain completely unsolved. How is this not just toxic, cowardly escapism? How does hallucinating a different outcome actually change the physical world?
It is the most vital question, and answering it requires us to completely redefine our understanding of the mechanical nature of the subconscious mind. We treat our subconscious like a brilliant, discerning supercomputer.
Right, like it's calculating everything perfectly.
But it's not. The subconscious is immensely, terrifyingly powerful, but it is fundamentally entirely blind. It sits in absolute darkness. It possesses absolutely no internal filtering mechanism, no sensory organs of its own, to distinguish between a vividly imagined, intensely felt internal vision and a concrete external physical event.
It is locked in a dark room. It only knows what the nervous system reports to it.
Exactly.
So it cannot tell the difference between a traumatic event that physically happened a decade ago and a vividly imagined scene of triumph happening in the theater of the mind right now.
It only reads the universal language of emotional charge. It measures the intensity of the frequency. When you aggressively loop that scene of immense triumph and flood your entire biological nervous system with the profound, overwhelming emotion of success, your blind subconscious mind assumes with absolute certainty that the success has physically, materially occurred.
That is incredible.
The original venom, the heavy frequency of defeat injected by the external rejection, is entirely and physically displaced by the towering frequency of triumph. You are not indulging in a lie. You are utilizing administrative privileges to manually alter the architectural blueprint of your reality before it is sent to the cosmic builder.
You are overriding the corrupted code. The external world handed you a heavy, dense blueprint of failure. The entity of defeat tried to pour the concrete. But before it could dry, before it could harden into your permanent reality, you forcefully swapped it out for an illuminated blueprint of success.
Yes.
And because the cosmos is simply a neutral, reflective mirror, it has absolutely no choice but to begin constructing your physical circumstances based on the new dominant blueprint you are projecting.
That is the immense power of the first method. It is the immediate, vital, life-saving antidote to the serpent's venom. It stops the spread of the infection. But there is a second method, a higher, infinitely more demanding paradigm.
Okay, what's the second method?
Well, if the first method is learning how to swiftly and efficiently extract the venom after a bite, the second method is the profound, reality-shattering realization that the serpent never actually existed in the first place.
The singular path. Let's explore this overarching monumental paradigm shift. Because if the first method is the emergency trauma care, the second method feels like an entirely new mode of existence.
It is. To walk the singular path, you must completely and utterly dissolve the deeply ingrained human illusion of multiple diverging paths. You must refuse to acknowledge the concept of polarity altogether when observing your own life.
You're demanding that we throw out the entire map of human experience, the map that clearly labels failure on the left and success on the right.
You must burn that map entirely. You assume with a deep, unyielding cellular knowing that there is only one possible path in all of existence. The singular, unbroken path leading directly to the inevitable materialization of your ultimate desire.
Just one path.
You adopt the absolute conviction that every single event that occurs, no matter how catastrophic it appears on the surface, is simply a necessary, flawlessly designed stepping stone on that singular path.
I want to build a visual architecture for this concept.
Go for it.
Imagine you are navigating a grand, majestic vessel across a vast, endless ocean. Your compass is locked onto your ultimate destination. The waters are calm, the wind is favorable, and you are sailing smoothly.
A perfect voyage.
Right. Then, without warning, the sky turns violently black. Chaotic, screaming winds tear across the water. The sea churns into a frenzy. Massive, crushing waves crash against the hull of your ship, and you are violently, helplessly blown, seemingly entirely off your intended course. You are pushed into uncharted, terrifying waters.
Now observe how the overwhelming majority of humanity would label that exact event.
They would label it a catastrophic, unmitigated failure, a profound disaster. They would see it as undeniable proof that they never should have left the safety of the harbor.
Yeah.
They would look up at the unfamiliar constellations, realize they are miles away from their meticulously plotted coordinates, and they would drop to their knees. The entity of defeat would flood the deck of their consciousness with absolute, paralyzing discouragement and an overwhelming terror of the open water.
However, if you are operating from the elevated vantage point of the singular path, if you maintain the unshakable, dense internal frequency of your final destination, your interpretation of the violent storm changes entirely.
How so?
The violent rocking of the boat is no longer a malicious disaster meant to destroy you. It is simply the natural, expected, entirely neutral turbulence of forward travel.
So the storm isn't a cosmic punishment for a lack of worthiness. It's just weather. It is a neutral atmospheric condition.
Precisely. Those immense, terrifying detours, those violent, screaming winds that blew you entirely off your perceived course, are in fact cosmically necessary realignments.
Realignments.
The universe possesses a vantage point that your limited human perception lacks. Perhaps that sudden violent storm blew your vessel away from a massive, hidden reef just beneath the surface that would have torn your hull apart and sunk you entirely.
Wow.
Perhaps it aggressively pushed you into an invisible, rapid current that will actually accelerate your journey tenfold once the dark skies finally clear.
The limitation of our perception is the root of our suffering. We cannot see the submerged reef, and we possess no instruments to detect the hidden current. All we see is the wind violently blowing us in what we perceive to be the wrong direction. We judge the entirety of our existence based on a fragmented view.
We judge the immense, complex journey by the temporary, fleeting external reflection of the present moment, rather than anchoring ourselves to the final internal destination.
Right.
These terrifying detours, these closed doors and collapsed visions, they only become permanent, catastrophic wrong turns if your internal state collapses to match the external turbulence.
So if you panic, you sink.
If you drop your heavy iron anchor in the dead center of the raging storm, fall to the deck, and boldly declare to the cosmos, "I am entirely lost, I have failed," then the universe, acting as the perfect mirror, simply says, "As you wish." And it leaves you permanently stranded in the wreckage of your own declaration.
But if you refuse to drop the anchor, if you grip the wheel with white knuckles, if you stubbornly maintain the internal frequency of already possessing the exact reality you seek, despite the howling wind,
Then the universe has absolutely no choice but to continuously construct the bridge leading directly to your destination, no matter how chaotic, absurd, or entirely disconnected the immediate physical elements appear to be.
it has to align.
The singular path demands a radical defiance of physical evidence. It demands that you look directly at the closed door, the painful rejection, the collapsed financial deal, and say with absolute authority, "This is not a failure. This is simply the universe aggressively clearing the debris from my path to build a faster, more efficient route to my inevitable success."
That requires an immense, almost superhuman magnitude of internal fortitude to look at devastating, life-altering loss directly in the face while the wounds are still fresh, and completely refuse to label it as a loss, to refuse to give it the power of a negative definition.
It is the absolute unyielding mastery of the self. When you completely refuse to label any event as a failure, the parasitic entity of defeat entirely starves to death. It has nothing to consume.
Because you aren't producing the food it needs.
Exactly. It cannot feed on your reality because your consciousness is simply not producing the necessary frequencies of disappointment, discouragement, or fear. You become completely invisible to it. You become energetically immune.
As we attempt to pull these immense cosmic mechanics down into the practical reality of our daily lives, the gravity of this conversation becomes truly staggering.
It changes everything.
If we connect this to the broader picture of human potential, it redefines everything. Our external realities, the careers we build, the partnerships we foster, the bank balances we obsess over, the physical circumstances we inhabit, they're entirely fluid.
They're constantly in motion.
They are not solid structures. They are like a vast body of water, constantly shifting, constantly swirling, waiting for something to give them a permanent shape. And they are desperately waiting for the heavy, immovable anchor of our internal conviction.
The physical world is waiting for you to unequivocally decide who you are, without demanding that the external world prove it to you first. The external world cannot initiate. It can only respond.
Every perceived setback we encounter, every door that slams in our face, every silent room that echoes with our unanswered requests, is merely an echo. It is the cosmos asking a very simple, incredibly profound question. Are you truly fundamentally committed to the frequency you claim to hold? Or will you instantly drop your magnificent posture the very moment I show you a distorted reflection in the glass?
This leads us to a crucial, liberating realization about the fundamental nature of our interaction with the physical realm. Humanity spends an overwhelming magnitude of its life force furiously fighting the external environment, trying to wrestle the physical circumstances into submission through sheer willpower.
Just forcing things to happen.
But the physical world is entirely innocent. It is merely a loyal, mechanical servant, flawlessly reflecting the energetic decrees issued by the subconscious mind.
It makes me think about how much precious time and energy we waste obsessing over the logistical how. When we face a monumental challenge, our intellectual ego immediately springs into action, trying to map out the exact, step-by-step logistical sequence to solve it. We try to micromanage the infinite intelligence of the universe.
Which is an exercise in profound, exhausting futility. The logistical how is the exclusive domain of the cosmos. It possesses infinite pathways. Your only responsibility, your only true domain of control is the what and the why, maintaining the specific, unwavering frequency of the end result. When you attempt to micromanage the how, when you try to force a specific pathway to open, you are inherently introducing a vibration of doubt. You are communicating to the universe, "I do not trust your mechanics to find the path, therefore I must force it myself." And that doubt, however subtle, however well-intentioned, immediately cracks the dense foundation of your conviction.
Let's expand on that specific friction point, because I think this is where the overwhelming majority of ambitious people get completely stuck.
Absolutely.
We are deeply culturally conditioned to be aggressive problem solvers. We are taught from a very young age that constant visible action is the only true valid metric of progress. We believe that if you aren't sweating, if you aren't constantly moving the heavy pieces around the board, if you aren't utterly exhausted, you simply aren't trying hard enough to materialize your vision.
Action in the physical realm is necessary, yes, but there is a fundamental difference in the energetic origin of the movement. Inspired action born naturally from a state of absolute knowing is fundamentally different from frantic, forced action born from a state of terrified lack.
Oh, that's a huge distinction.
When you act out of fear, when you furiously swing your fists at the glass in the mirror house, your actions are dense, heavy, and overwhelmingly counterproductive. You are actively pushing against the natural flowing current of the cosmos.
You are furiously swimming upstream, exhausting your muscles, drowning in the effort, while the massive, powerful river is desperately trying to carry you effortlessly toward the vast ocean.
Precisely. When you maintain the unshakable internal frequency of success, when your conviction is absolute and devoid of doubt, your physical actions become entirely effortless.
They just flow.
You are moved by sudden, inexplicable intuition. You find yourself picking up the telephone to make a call at the exact, mathematically perfect moment. You take a seemingly random, illogical detour on your routine commute home and unexpectedly cross paths with the exact individual who holds the key to your endeavor. The cosmos flawlessly coordinates the infinite logistics. You simply follow the illuminated breadcrumbs it drops before you.
The difference in the physical sensation is profound. It is the exact difference between trying to violently force a heavy, jagged metal gear into a delicate machine that simply isn't built to accommodate it, versus softly dropping a perfectly shaped puzzle piece into its exact predestined slot. There is no friction. It simply clicks.
And the only way to ensure you are continually holding the right puzzle piece is to ruthlessly, relentlessly guard your internal state. You must become the uncompromising gatekeeper of your own consciousness.
A gatekeeper. I love that.
When an external event occurs that threatens to plunge your internal frequency into the heavy depths of disappointment, you must recognize the mechanical nature of it instantly. You must see the parasitic entity of defeat hovering at the threshold, waiting for you to voluntarily open the door.
And instead of inviting that entity inside, instead of pulling out a chair, sitting down at the table and having a long, miserable, indulgent conversation with it about the vast history of your past failures, you forcefully shut the door.
You shut it immediately.
You immediately execute the protocol of reimagination. You extract the venom before it can circulate through the bloodstream of your psyche.
And eventually, as you continually practice this rigorous internal discipline, you evolve beyond the need for the antidote. You graduate to the second method. You completely stop seeing the entity at all. You walk the singular path.
Wow.
You look at the very same catastrophic events that used to entirely devastate your reality, and you feel nothing but a calm, serene, detached curiosity. You observe the collapsed structure and you think, the wind is shifting. The cosmos is aggressively rearranging the board to my ultimate benefit. How utterly fascinating.
How fascinating. What a beautifully neutral, incredibly empowered posture to adopt when facing a massive disruption. It is no longer, this is a life-ending disaster, but rather how fascinating that reality is bending in this particular way.
Adopting that posture removes all internal resistance, and when there is absolutely no internal resistance, the external reflection must rapidly clear to match the calm of the projector.
This entire exploration circles back to the sheer, terrifying, magnificent power of the subconscious mind. We move through our lives, treating our minds like casual, open-air storage units.
We really do.
We indiscriminately throw every passing chaotic thought, every piece of terrifying global news, every minor stinging rejection into the pile. We leave the door wide open. But the mind is not a passive storage unit. It is a highly active perpetual engine. It is a reality-generating engine.
It is an engine that never sleeps, never takes a rest, and absolutely never questions the quality of the fuel you shovel into its furnace. If you consistently feed it the heavy, dense, toxic fuel of discouragement and fear, it will flawlessly, efficiently manufacture a physical reality of perpetual stagnation and ruin.
It's just following orders.
It does not judge your choices. It simply blindly obeys your energetic commands.
When we speak about the pursuit of true, ultimate freedom, we aren't fundamentally talking about the accumulation of financial wealth or the ability to travel geographically without restriction. Those physical manifestations are merely secondary byproducts. True, absolute freedom is the attainment of absolute sovereignty over your own internal frequency. It is the profound ability to stand dead center in the middle of a raging, chaotic storm, on the deck of a vessel that feels as though it's splintering apart into 1,000 pieces, and state with absolute cellular certainty, I have already arrived at my destination.
That state of being is the absolute zenith of human potential. It is the complete mastery of the invisible architecture that builds and sustains the visible, physical world.
We have taken a human experience that brings an overwhelming magnitude of pain, the sharp, stinging bite of failure, the heavy, suffocating weight of rejection, and we have completely, meticulously disassembled this machinery. We've laid out the gears and the springs on the table. As we close this monumental journey, I want to leave you with a concept to deeply consider, something that pushes the boundaries of this paradigm even further into the unknown.
Consider the magnificent possibility that the universe does not deliberately withhold your deepest, most profound desires to test your strength or measure your resilience. Consider that it never punishes you for your perceived missteps or delays your victory due to a lack of worthiness.
Right.
It simply, fluidly, and continuously shapes the physical world to match the exact, precise dimensions of your internal self-concept. It is a perfect, entirely uncompromising tailor.
It only cuts the physical fabric to fit the exact energetic measurements you provide.
So I leave you with this final, sweeping inquiry. If you were to wake up tomorrow as the dawn breaks and you completely, ruthlessly stripped away every single label of good and bad, every rigid definition of success and failure from the entire vast history of your existence, if you completely neutralize the heavy emotional narrative of your past, what kind of universe would you suddenly find yourself standing in?
An infinite, completely blank canvas.
Waiting silently for your new, undeniable decree.
It brings us right back to the precipice of that opening image. You spend an epoch meticulously building a vision. You step forward, full of anticipation, and the door slams violently shut in your face. The sound echoes. But now, possessing the alchemist's understanding, we know the fundamental truth of the mechanism. It was never actually a closed door blocking your path. It was simply a mirror, standing in the corridor, asking you if you are finally truly ready to change the image you are projecting.